Hi all and welcome to Cosmic Voice, and this is a specially arranged show. It's kind of been done in a short time. The timing was done so we can allow many of our listeners in the UK and Europe to tune in and not in the middle of the morning. And also two of our admins are from Europe, and so they're not up until daybreak. So the pretext to this show, I posted something that was, some people may see as being cryptic, others will get it. And I posted on the CV page last night, time for all to expand their own truth bubble. What will be presented tonight is a fairly comprehensive guide of who is who, what is what, when is when, but your truth bubble, I warn you, will be expanded. Some will react in fear, some will rail against it, some will be shocked, and some will absorb it. Truth is painful. Many ask for it, including some of our more notable members. Yes, Mr. Danforth, you ask for truth, you're going to get it. Like I said, you may not like the truth, but it is the truth. But few realise the implications of being told the truth. The 3 stages of truth we all have covered many times. First stage is being ridiculed. He or she is a conspiracy theorist or a nut. We've all gone through that and suffered because of it. The conspiracy theorist is the one propagating the lie, not when it's based in fact. The second stage is vehemently denied. All have been through that, and all of us have lost friends and family because of it. The reason being is they can't handle the truth. That's the top and bottom line of it. This is why I said expand your truth bubble. Accept all possibilities. It opens more doors to the real truth. And the third, it is accepted as the norm. But that's only after a few stepped forward and made it comfortable for the rest to follow. Safety in numbers, or the sheep following the herd. We've all heard that term. At the end of the day, we have all lived our lives, whole lives, accepting the lie. That applies in all countries, but it is an epidemic in this country, the USA. Our whole history is a lie from the moment Columbus, funded by Spanish royalty and the Roman Catholic Church, as they knew it already existed, people from all over the world had visited here thousands of years before Columbus even existed. We have been peppered with that much falsehood that truth is buried in an avalanche of it, cowed into fear by successes, generally boogeymen residing 8,000 miles away, who are coming to get us. The Russians or the communists, the Bin Ladens, the Husseins, the Taliban, the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, the Chinese, and the latest classic, which I'll go into later, the Muslims. All very far away and out of harm's reach, and people feel safer for that. But it's 100% falsehood. The sleight of hand, the mirroring tactics of the cabal to distract you and get you to ignore the monstrous-sized elephant in this country. We can't face it, or many can't face it, as it's too much to handle. A famous quote of Gandhi: "The truth is the truth, even if you are in a minority of one." And the purpose of this show is to provide a detailed background of what's going on globally and outside of here. If you know who or what the real problem is, you can then tailor the solution. We will have some solutions and talk about it towards the end of the show. If you continue to follow the false narrative imposed by the cabal, you don't know the problem, so there is no solution. You do not have to accept this information that is put forward tonight. This is your own free will. I encourage all of you to do your own research to validate for themselves. That is how you learn. That is how I learned, and also Drake. This piece is being compiled at very short notice, and I hope it provides you with the inspiration, not fear, to drive forward for the benefit of you, your family, your friends, and the whole of humanity. That is what is at stake here now. Special mention in the background of this piece goes to Drake for his support. My own research, my own intuition, knowledge base and connections. Thanks also to Shane, a person by the name of Cameron Falley. The final pieces of this jigsaw, many of the pieces are in place, but he tied in a few more that gave the picture a more of a whole. And others who have pulled in this research, and thanks to Chloe for her input as well. Before I go into it, I'm going to state a few quotes which will be significant. The most common way people give up their power is thinking they don't have any. That is a classic attempt by the cabal over hundreds, if not thousands of years, to belittle the people into thinking they have no power. The people have all the power. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Martin Luther King Jr. We've all had the learning curve of Drake over 3 or 4 years. Many of us have gone out and dealt with the frustration of trying to educate people to a different reality. Actually, it is reality. It's them that's not living in reality. And this will be important, this next one, by Henry Ford. When everything seems to be going against you, remember that the aeroplane takes off against the wind, not with it. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. Very famous quote. And the final one, everything you have ever wanted is on the other side of fear. That is what they've put in our heads throughout our lives. Fear this, fear that. Most of all, fear ourselves. Enough is enough. First part of this, I'm going to give you some background of Illuminati history. This is where it all comes into. Remember, the Freemasonry wasn't started by Albert Pike. Rather, it was infiltrated by the Illuminati, who were looking for a respectable forum to which they could hide their clandestine activities. Albert Pike set up to use the Palladian Rite, many won't have heard of that term, in Charleston, South Carolina, which is situated on the 33rd degree latitude. It's not by accident. Baghdad is also on that same latitude. I'll get into that later. The purpose was to create a satanic umbrella group that would tie all Masonic groups together. Those who have been there will recognize, those who have been in South Carolina, in Charleston, will recognize the market in the center of Charleston is a replica of Solomon's Temple. Hits you like a sore thumb the minute you turn around the corner. I've been there and I've seen it. We'll get more into that particular temple at a later time. Most people are familiar with the name Adam Weishaupt, 1748 and died 1811. It's a pity he didn't die in 1749. He formed the order of the Perfectibilists, on May the 1st, 1776. Yes, that date again, famous to Americans. This day is also celebrated as May Day throughout many Western countries. So you think you're celebrating Union Day and People Day and all that. No, you're not. But you're celebrating their ritual days, when they decided that they would take over humanity and trample all over them. Remember that when you're celebrating holidays going forward. Which later became known as the Illuminati. Adam Weishaupt, unbeknown to some, was a Jesuit, not a Zionist or Nazi. Next came along was, this is one of the ruling families, Giuseppe Mazzini, 1805 to 1872. A 33-degree Mason, was selected by the Illuminati to head their worldwide operations in 1834. Mazzini was also the person who founded the Mafia in 1860. Drug running, money laundering, trafficking and child trafficking as ways of collecting funds on behalf of the Catholic Church. People will find that uncomfortable. It's the reality. Because of the Mazzini's revolutionary activities in Europe, the Bavarian government cracked down on the Illuminati and other secret societies for allegedly plotting a massive overthrow of European monarchies. You will see that picture become clear at a later date. History repeats itself. During his leadership, Mazzini enticed Albert Pike into the now formally disbanded, due to the activities of other secret societies and the royal families, but still operating Illuminati. Pike was fascinated by the idea of a one world government. I think it's a recent event. I think it started with Bush Sr., 1981. This is 1800s. It's not. When asked by Mazzini, he readily agreed to write a ritual tome. That says it all. A ritual tome that guided the transition from average high-ranking Mason into a top-ranking Illuminati Mason, 33rd degree, or 33rd degree. Since Mazzini also wanted Pike to head the Illuminati's American chapter. In 1871, Pike published the 861-page Masonic handbook known as the Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Scottish Rite, you will learn, are a lot different from the normal Freemasons. At this point, it's difficult to discern which is which due to the infiltration. After Mazzini's death on March 11, 1872, Pike appointed Adriano Lemmi, another 33-degree Mason, a banker from Florence, Italy, to run their subversive activities in Europe. Lemmi was a supporter of Patriot, familiar here, and revolutionary Giuseppe Garibaldi, and may have been active in the Luciferian Society founded by Pike. Lemmi in turn was succeeded by Lenin and Trotsky, then by Stalin. The revolutionary activities of all these men were financed, wait for it, by British, French, German and American international bankers. All of them denominated by the House of Rothschilds. Between 1859 and 1871, Pike worked out a military blueprint for 3 world wars. Listen to this piece intently, please. And various revolutions throughout the world which he considered would forward the conspiracy to its final stage in the 20th century. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agentaire of the Illuminati between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Students of history will recognize that the political alliances of England on one side and Germany on the other, forged between 1871 and 1898 by Otto von Bismarck, co-conspirator of Albert Pike, were instrumental in bringing about the First World War. So, they planned the First World War 40 to 50 years ahead of time. This is my narrative now. And the First World War, to put that text into more understandable terms or easier terms, was to remove the ruling families, the kings and queens of the era that didn't fit their agenda. Many of us have thought in the past, and still do, that they're all one and the same. No, they're not. It's the sleight of hand, mirror tactics again. So to remove ruling families, weaken Russia, and set the stage for the state of Israel via the Balfour Declaration implemented by Britain, who owned Palestine at the behest of, wait for it, Lionel Walter Rothschilds. Yet again. Remember also, Neil Keenan mentioned this recently. In 1921, US President Warren Harding, the UK, Japan, Germany and France signed an agreement to start another world war in the 1930s. Harding died in office soon after. As they say, dead people can't talk. At the same time, the Muslim Brotherhood was also set up in this period for future development. Second World War, as stated by Albert Pike, must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which should then be restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. After the Second World War, communism was made strong enough to begin to take over the weaker governments. 1945, at the Potsdam Conference between Truman, Churchill and Stalin, a large portion of Europe was simply handed over to Russia, and on the other side of the world, the aftermath of the war with Japan helped to sweep the tide of communism into China. Readers who argue that the terms Nazism and Zionism were not known in 1871 should remember that the Illuminati invented both of these movements. In addition, communism is an ideology and, as a coined phrase, originates in France during the Revolution. In 1785, Restif coined the phrase 4 years before revolution broke out. Restif and Babeuf, in turn, were influenced by Rousseau, as was the most famous conspirator of them all, Adam Weishaupt. There's that name again. It's about history repeating itself again. Britain's leaders hoped that a formal declaration in favour of Zionism would help gain Jewish support for the Allies in neutral countries, in the United States and especially in Russia, where the powerfully anti-Semitic Tsarist government had just been overthrown with the help of Russia's significant Jewish population. There'll be more about that later. So the Second World War, and this is my input, was to remove the governments, create the State of Israel 3 years later, carve up the world into smaller pieces via Bretton Woods agreements, and create councils like the UN 1945, NATO 1949, and the IMF 1945. During the war, when the UN didn't even exist, as I said earlier, 1949. On January the 1st, 1942, this is while the war was going on, representatives of 26 nations at war with the Axis powers met in Washington to sign the Declaration of the United Nations endorsing the Atlantic Charter, pledging to use their full resources against the Axis and agreeing not to make a separate peace. So not only did they orchestrate the war 18 years before, they also orchestrated during it. At the Quebec Conference in August 1943, Secretary of State Cordell Hull and British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden agreed to draft a declaration that included a call for a general international organisation based on the principle sovereignty, equality of all nations. That's a misnomer in itself. An agreed declaration was issued after the Foreign Ministers' Conference in Moscow in October 1943, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt met with the Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin in Tehran, Iran, or Iran, as we say here, in November 1943. A US president meeting with a Prime Minister of a nation we are at war with to create an Illuminati council. Hope people grasp that. Boggles the mind. He proposed an international organisation comprising of an assembly of all member states and a 10-member executive committee to discuss social and economic issues. The United States, Great Britain, Soviet Union and China would enforce peace as the four policemen. Meanwhile, Allied representatives found a set of task-oriented organisations. And some of these are maybe not be familiar, but you'll understand the concept behind it. Food and Agriculture Organization, 1943. The United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, 1943. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, April 1944. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, 1944, and the International Civil Aviation Organization, also 1944. US, British, Soviet and Chinese representatives met again at Dumbarton Oaks in Washington in August and September of 1944 to draft the charter of a post-war international organization based on the principle of collective security. They recommended a General Assembly of all Member States and a Security Council consisting of the Big Four plus 6 members chosen by the Assembly. voting procedures and the veto power of permanent members of the Security Council were finalized at the Yalta Conference in 1945, when Roosevelt and Stalin agreed that the veto would not prevent discussions by the Security Council. Roosevelt agreed to General Assembly membership for Ukraine and Belarus, while reserving the right, which was never exercised, to seek 2 more votes for the United States. So, whilst your grandparents were off fighting a war to stop them nasty Germans, this country and Russians, this country and its representatives, the UK and its representatives, were sitting down, hobnobbing and agreeing international agreements against the people. Like I said, truth can be painful. Next part, the Third World War. Before I start this, I have precog abilities. It's been demonstrated to people close to me quite a lot. And I do not see this ever happening. Albert Pike states, the Third World War, this is in 1870, remember, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agent heir of the Illuminati. In other words, they're going to split between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. Hello, people who blame Muslims, now you know why we say quit it. I'll repeat that again. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and the political Zionism, the state of Israel, are mutually destroyed each other. That was the original plan. Things have slightly changed. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, the origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. And everywhere the citizens, I warned about that term on the page last night, do not call yourself a citizen, please research what it means, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate the destroyers of civilization and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose theistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction. Anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. Brought finally out into the public view, this manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. This is what the church are pushing for. This is why the church over the last few years has been telling people the truth. Jesus wasn't born on Christmas Day. and a whole heap of other things. They're setting you up for a clash of the civilizations, Muslim versus Christian, yet again, organisations that don't really exist, like borders, imaginary lines on a piece of paper, all designed to divide and conquer the people. Since the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, world events, and particularly in the Middle East, showing a growing unrest and instability between modern Zionism and the Arabic world, this is completely in line with the call for the Third World War to be fought between the two and their allies on both sides. This Third World War is still to come, and recent events show us that it's not far off. My personal opinion is I disagree. It will be prevented. This plan, and this is my input now, this plan was supposed to start in 1960. It failed. They started again in 1980. It failed. They started again in 2000. It failed. In 2012, they tried to play magic using CERN and other items. It failed. So World War III, at the behest of Albert Pike and his prophecies, that famous word again that's littered through the religious books and people like to bring forward, they're all written by these same people. Not done by prophets like Muhammad or Jesus or all the other names. It's done by these same people. Done over hundreds, if not thousands of years. Why do you think they burned all the books at Alexandria? Erase history. Another world war around the 1000s. Same again. Erase the people, erase the history. Same again at what's known as the Dark Ages, where all kinds of disease was spread to the population deliberately. Again, a mass culling of the population. So then they rewrite the history. And on and on and on it goes. Now, a lot of this is to do with certain factions, royal families, family lines, bloodlines, off-world lines, whether people like that truth or not. It's all part of it. You know, when you're discussing some of these things, people accept it so far. It's that truth bubble expansion again. And you go, oh, we've mentioned ET. Whether we like it or not, it plays into it. And just because you can't handle that side of the truth does not stop it being the truth. It's a lesson each and every one of us has to learn. The more you open yourself, the more you bloom. The more you get the truth, the nearer you to get to understanding it. So, World War III is the clash of the civilizations via religion, which was all created for diversion from your true self, the divide and conquer tactics, which we're all familiar with now, and create the loose energy by convincing you are committing sins on a daily basis. It's not us that's committing the sins. It's them. The Ten Commandments. Apologies for the religious people, but if you actually really study the Ten Commandments, it's not possible to fulfill one of them, never mind 10. When you see the proper wording behind it, we cannot not commit sins. So you're at the behest of negative energy that they profit after. The group Al-Qaeda in Iraq was formed as an affiliate of the Al-Qaeda network of Islamist militants during the Iraq War. The group eventually expanded into Syria and rose to prominence as the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, ISIL, during the Syrian civil war. In the summer of 2014, the group launched an offensive in the northern Iraq, seizing the city of Mosul. The group declared it a caliphate under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who took the name and title of Caliph Ibrahim and named itself as the Islamic State. ISIL's claim to be the highest authority of Muslims has not been widely recognized beyond the territory it controls with 10 million people, and the group has been at war with armed forces including the Iraqi army, the Syrian army, the Free Syrian Army, Jabhat al-Nusra, and the Kurdish and People's Protection Units, along with 60-nation coalition in its efforts to establish a de facto state on Iraqi and Syrian territory. What this is really stating is this is Zionist expansion done via CIA, MI6 and Mossad. A little bit of background now. 9 minutes before the hour, and I'll take a break. In the second hour, we're going to be covering the New World Order players. Some of you will be familiar, some you won't. We're going to be covering the role of each of them and the outcomes of each of them. That's planned and not planned. Plans for the US, some of the exposures, the issues of the banking, the issues of BRICS, issues of Iraq, and hopefully a new plan. So, like I started the premise of the show, is to give people the background of where we've come from with this, where it went to, and where we're at currently. And what we're facing, which will be outlined in the second part, is, from Americans' point of view, is, I'm going to put it, out and out devastation. Each and every one of the factions that were pointed out in the second hour all want to end the USA permanently. This is what's come out with the knowledge that I've gained in recent weeks, helped by Drake, helped by Shane. But rest assured, we will have help. We do have help, and we will get help. So we'll be covering a bit to that and outlining what is going on, because there's many things going on around the world now that some of us, including myself, I might add, being kind of guided down the wrong path. But this is the learning curve we all have. We haven't stated on this show that we know it all, because we don't. Some of this is so hidden, it's never seen the light of day. But since 2012, when they failed to get into place their plans, because that was the cut-off date, the light has come through. That light is getting brighter by the day. What we don't need is people who are shining the light, the likes of all the Cosmic Voice members and the many other members of all the different groups and who follow the different alternative medias and alleged conspiracy sites. that light has to shine brighter, not be dimmed into fear. Yes, it's a bit scary. I'm speaking to family members today. They're frightened. Some of them are listening tonight for them. Yes, it's scary. But if we sit here and do nothing, the outcome's even scarier. If you don't know the problem, you cannot provide the solution. So I hope, as Drake says, we'll probably get our famous transcriptist, Chloe, to cover this show again so you can go over it yourself, and we give you some of the links that was being used tonight. And we'll have a couple of songs. Well, here's a nice one. This will fit. So we'll be back with the second hour and go into this in more detail. That's the background. We'll give you now the updated version of where we're at now. So we'll see you soon. Bye for now. Hi all, and welcome back to the second hour of the evening of this special show that was called for late last night and early this morning. We're now going to get into the more heavier stuff of what is playing out. Yes, Lynn, some of us may have heard it before, some of us haven't. You won't have heard this part, so please bear with it. The New World Order players. Now, many of us are familiar with the Nazis, and the background of the Nazis was obviously from, which, as stated earlier, was the Illuminati, who created all the factions, all under one umbrella. So they all step forward at certain times to promote a single agenda. That single agenda is now fractured. The reason it's fractured has been covered in our show, thanks to Shane and others. The ET control that was implemented on this planet at the behest of humanity at the time left this planet in the summer. That left a massive void. Then work was done by myself and Shane and others to convince, particularly Shane, convince the parents who operate the covens to step down. Do not new boss, same as the old boss. Let's do it a different way. And 18 of the 21 left. We're left with 3 covens out of the 13 and 3 parents out of the 21. So there's a radical trashing of the original control structure implemented on this planet, going back many, many thousands of years, long before the Vatican states we existed from, many thousands of years ago. Then we're coming down to the more familiar layers of what is the umbrella, as stated earlier, of the Illuminati, which is the Nazis, the Freemason groups, which I'll distinguish shortly, the Jesuits, and what has come forward this week, or over the last 2 weeks, also the Asians. The Chinese are involved in the New World Order also. So is, or was, Mr. Putin of Russia. Now, I've been told by many sources, more than 3, of Putin's role. He was designated to play the good role in the good cop, bad cop routine. I always had doubts over Russia and China, but I went along with the narrative because that was what was comfortable. I was wrong to do so. I should have listened to my intuition. So, the Chinese are also part of the Illuminati, but it's not all of the Chinese. This is where it gets difficult. It's particularly centered around what's known as the Li family, an ancient family going back into the dynasties that's been brought forward. Now, what happens in history is if you don't completely erase those dynasties or empires or ruling families, within 2 to 3 generations, they return again. We saw Nazism 60, 70 years ago. It's raised its ugly head again. Only it's not the headquarters of Germany no more. It's the headquarters of Washington, D.C., whether people in this country like that idea or not. The Bushes, the Clintons are all part of that same Nazi group. The Bushes are known as the Sheriffs. Lots of our members are familiar with that term. They're also linked with the British royal family, who are also Nazis. Now, I'll get back to Russia. So, the Asians were working alongside Russia to bring the downfall of the US, not only the dollar, but the whole country. The Jesuits are also trying to do the same thing. The Zionists are trying to bring down everything. Because they're the chosen ones. They've been told they're the chosen ones. The chosen ones, as mentioned on our show previously, and indicative of that area, just it's familiar, is the name for the Anunnaki. Yes, it's those ETs again. They were known as the chosen ones. But there was another group called the Batal, who are God's soldiers, or Source's soldiers, or Jesus soldiers, whichever name you want to associate with it. It doesn't matter to me. I prefer Source. And this is the source of a lot of the issues in the Middle East. Yes, we get told it's about the oil, and it's about some of the ancient ET artifacts that are left behind that have value, not only from a technological point of view, but they have value to sell onto other races and species. The wealth gain again. And all that region is has been plagued with war throughout our history. The idea that Africa was the cradle of civilization is another sleight of hand. It's not. It was the Middle East. And it's nothing to do with Israel. Like stated earlier, in the 1800s, they were laying out plans for a new state of Israel. It didn't exist in the past. It's not in any scriptures. It's not on any hieroglyphs. No mention of it. That will be uncomfortable to many, but I'll give further evidence on that later. So, the Russians and the Chinese, as stated earlier, are trying to bring the US down. Except Putin found out the real plan, that the Chinese are using the Russians and then they're going to wipe them out. Russia is an issue because of mainly they're very devout Christian. Another country that has an issue because it's secular is Japan. So you can't divide and conquer those two particular countries, which is why they're playing a big role currently today. Now, in February, and this is my information, not others, this is my information, Vladimir Putin was removed from the surface of the planet and attended meetings. It is my understanding he was given help on how to correct the issues on behalf of humanity. This flies in the face of some of the others who still insist that Putin is the player for the New World Order. But I am of the belief, given those meetings, that Putin was given off-world assistance and also allies on the ground to alter history. Now, the Zionists, let's just come to the Jesuits. We'll cover them in a minute. The Zionists ousted in a coup, nothing to do with Kevin Annett, sadly, as we all believed. They ousted the Nazi Pope, Ratzinger, for their takeover of the Vatican. I'll repeat that again. They ousted the Nazi Pope. So what you're seeing here now is a break in the factions. The Illuminati, as it's known, as is the Committee of 300, now doesn't exist. They've all broken into factions. They are all fighting each other, far more than is being reported throughout the media. You're seeing bits of it. Not many can put two and two together, because if you don't understand where it's coming from, then you can't tie it in. So I understand it's difficult. So this present Pope wants to take over the world for the Jesuits. Unfortunately for him, the secret societies have reared their ugly head, particularly the P2 Lodge, and have infiltrated the Jesuits, and they want to take over. Unbeknownst to the P2 Lodge, the Zionist group have infiltrated both of them. Now, I read a Vatican plan that was probably in a region of 20 years ago. And I mentioned this on the page, and people said that's a very interesting thing, except it's real. Now, the Vatican's original plan was to create issues in Jerusalem. We've all heard of the Crusades and fighting over Jerusalem, and we're led to believe it's because of Jesus and Moses and all the other stuff. It's nothing to do with it. Again, it's to do with the off-world who were here before us. Now, the Vatican was going to set up Iran to attack Israel. And oops, false flag, Dome of the Rock vanishes. They clear out the area. Not only the Palestinians, but also the people known as Jews today. The Vatican, or the Jesuits, were going to build the third temple, Solomon's temple, whatever you want to call it, and house themselves in a giant walled city in Jerusalem. The Vatican, now that wasn't to stop people getting out, it's to stop people going in. And only they will exist, like the Vatican City. Only they go in there. Yes, they'll invite people in for nice walk-arounds, but you don't see the real areas. They started building the wall to separate the Palestinians, they said. Now they were building the wall in readiness so you couldn't see the temple being built when they moved the people out. They've now started increasing the height of the wall in certain areas. Not only will they increase the height, they will increase its length dramatically. So the Palestinians, whose land it is, will be moved out. We've seen that over the last 20, 30 years. And largely the rest of the world has turned a blind eye to it. You, I, everybody else. It's not happening on our land. So we don't let them deal with it. That is catastrophic for humanity. Everyone that suffers, we all suffer. When people realise we're all part of one source, then you'll grasp what I've just said. We have all sat back and watched atrocity after atrocity committed against humanity. And largely, I have to say, and it's uncomfortable for me living in this country, although I love the country and I wouldn't swap it living here for anything else, but largely it's been done by American soldiers. Is it American ideals? No, it's not. Let's get that right from the off. Is it the soldiers' fault? Largely no. When I say largely, I believe after a certain length of time, some of them, or sufficient of them, should have worked out what the hell was going on and did something about it. Whether it's to protect their paycheck or protect their lives or their families' lives. We've all gone through that to a degree. Accepted jobs for the sake of it when we don't like it, because we just have to have a paycheck. So we've all done uncomfortable things that don't fit our own persona. But we've watched US troops, including the star of our own show, Mr. Bailey here, sacrificial lamb in Vietnam, to save American lives, America's freedoms? No. To fulfill Illuminati and cabal agendas. Same in Guatemala, Grenada, all the rest of them. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Sudan, and a whole heap of others that you forget, but there's just that many. Yugoslavia is another one. Divide and conquer. Let's split the nation into groups. Divide and conquer. The Illuminati's long-term plan is to divide and conquer the US as well. Won't be one country. It'll be split into regions, but it's easy to manage, like what they did with Iraq. That is their plan. Divide them into religious groups, or divide them into who will accept the most dollar. The mercenary people. Those mercenary people will pay at a later date for what they've done. You've accepted money to wipe out humanity. And that is part of a Western problem. I mentioned in our last show, consumerism. It's the death of us. It's killing us. We haven't got middle-class lifestyles. People keep saying they're eroding the middle class. We haven't got a middle class. It's an illusion. Another sleight of hand. You are working class with a credit card. plunged into a debt cycle that most can't get out of, because you've got the let's elevate the market, let's create money, let's pull people into getting bigger houses, better cars, blah, 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 and then let's crash it and then take it all off them. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And the people sit there and take it. We sit there and allow them to take our homes off us. We've all heard the stories, including in CV alone. Luna Lisa and a number of others. Lynn Lincoln. I'm going through it myself. If they think I'm not going to fight, they've got another thing coming. And this is what it takes. It takes the people to stand up as one and saying, we're not going to tolerate it. You are far more powerful than you will ever realise. This is why we've been trodden into the ground. Not only by Illuminati, but other species that have been here. They're frightened of our abilities. They're frightened of our powers. So over successive generations, through genetics and all kinds of mind control and other distractions like consumerism and poor education, and the main problem, religion, each and every one of them created. I could read a number of pieces to prove that, but that's the big one. A lot of people have given up a lot of their lives to worship something else. It's going to be, like I said at the start, the truth's going to be hard. Because what if that something else doesn't exist in the format you thought it did? So, the Vatican or the Jesuits are going to build the third temple. To facilitate that, they had to move the Dome of the Rock or crush it. Drake and I are both kind of surprised it hasn't already took place, but it's indicative of the prevention tactics that are ongoing behind the scenes. Now, the original was the Jesuits to move into Jerusalem, as the Vatican owns 2/3 of Jerusalem. What has taken place now is the Zionists got wind of what the Jesuits were planning, which is similar along the lines of the parents, which is wiping all the families, wiping all the Freemasons out, the Zionists out, and they carry on with their transhumanist agenda, along with Mr. Cash. Yes, he's a transhumanist. The Zionists got wind of it because each and every member of the Illuminati, courtesy of Shane and others, have been told the real truth. So now the Zionists have infiltrated the Jesuits, who were infiltrated by the P2 Lodge, and they're going to build the third temple. And no, it will not involve people of Israel. It will not involve Palestinians. It will not involve Arabs. It will not involve people of Syria. It will not involve the people of the Lebanon. It will not involve the people of Iraq or Jordan. Basically, that wall that currently exists will go right across the Middle East. And they're going to create their own enclave, or so they think. And all those people, some of which we've already witnessed on our news the last month or so, and some of you keep calling them immigrants, these damn immigrants. Like I said on an earlier show, How can you be an immigrant on your own planet? Borders don't exist. They're imaginary lines on a piece of paper given to you by the cabal and their education forces. So they're systematically removing all the peoples from those areas to move forward with this giant enclave of Zionist control in what is Jerusalem, but will expand into those other countries. Where are we next? The Nazis, which most are aware, came to the US right at the end of the war via Project Paperclip. Set up NASA, went underground, and like I said earlier, 2 generations to 3 generations later, they raised their ugly heads again. They're in league with the Scottish Rite, not to be confused with the ordinary Freemasons. So, the problem we have in America is we have the Scottish Rite, we've got the Nazis on one side running things, who ran things alongside the Zionists, the dual citizen people. You saw Mr. Trump last week. He started off saying all nice things, and then he slips one out of the bag. If I'm in power, we will support the state of Israel. Really, Mr. Trump? So, we're kind of in trouble because we've got 3 of the factions that the Jesuits and the Asian families all want to wipe out. That's why you're seeing a systematic takedown of the banking. That's why you're seeing a systematic purchasing of huge tracts of land. The Chinese have bought most of California. Rumour has it they have a whole heap of war paraphernalia, be it ships and submarines, off the coast of California now. They've also got 3 ships docked at Florida now. We've also seen evidence of strange aerial activity above California and Arizona. That is the war ongoing. We also saw activity of the US 4 times hitting China within the space of a month. Chinese fought back and hit a US base in Philippines, I think. I'm not too sure on that. But now they're on our borders. You also heard of the Chinese and the Russians going near Alaska last month. Now, it can have 2 meanings. Putin may be helping. I can't be 100% certain. I'm led to believe he is. Because Drake has fought and fought for each and every one of us for at least the last 4 years. You know, and it gets tiresome to me watching people saying, we worked this for 4 years. Without even considering the effort that Drake's put in. He's spoken to the agencies, he's spoken to the military, he's spoken to high-level other groups. He's spoken to the militias. You all remember the interjection with Rick Light going back a few years ago. He's spoken 600-mile round trip to the Oath Keepers. The militia, or large chunks of them, and the Oath Keepers are all following the false narrative. The Muslims are the issue. They're not. It's who's paying the Muslims to act out the role. Hi all, and welcome back to the final hour this evening of this special show. We're going to go into a few more things now. That's being played out in the MSM. Some of it we think is one thing, when actually it means another. Iran in particular, and all these agreements that went on recently. Now, this goes back to the plan for Jerusalem, and I'll cover a bit more of that. The Nazis outed, and part of the Zionists, I might add, and part of the Jesuits, all outed about the DNA of the Israeli people. That was done for a reason. That then to tell the rest of the world that the people of Israel don't belong there, which unusually for the Cabal is actually true. The people of Israel are Khazarians, and Khazarian covers Ukraine, Crimea, southern southwest tip of Russia. Now, the plan that I read or saw, going back 15 years at least ago, was for the people of Israel to be moved out and back into their homeland, in inverted commas, which is the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine has been ethnically cleansed, largely gone unnoticed or unreported in the media, although some people attached to our cosmic voice, namely Paul, Sirius Dogstar, has mentioned about the ongoing crisis in the past to do with the Ukraine. Well, ethnic cleansing of the natives there continues, and it's huge volumes being cleared out. Massive amounts of funds supplied by the country known as Israel, but not the people. Please don't make that mistake. It's nothing to do with the people. Have gone into the Ukraine. A lot of funds and a lot of equipment. So it doesn't take much to see of their removing of the people of Israel back to the Ukraine. People have said to me, that's wrong, but it's happening. Now, the plans for the temple were approved by the Pope when he went into Jerusalem in 2013. As 2/3 of the land of Jerusalem is owned by the Vatican. Now, part of the agreement with Iran is when they tried to take out Syria, they stopped that. Iran made an agreement, because they are a New World Order puppet as well, Mr. Dinner Jacket, with the Committee of 300 before it collapsed this year. Like I said, the Committee of 300 no longer exists because of the break of the factions. The agreement was for Iran to get access to the Middle East, which has been closed off, but not get involved with Israel. They will give Palestine to Iran. Obviously the Jews would not accept this, and they would have an issue. But like I said earlier, 2/3 of the land is already owned and operated by the Vatican, and they're going to build the first temple as part of the agreement, and Iran okayed it. Iran sold the whole of the Middle East out. Because of the UN International and United Nations and the Vatican, who control the temple, have kind of been infiltrated. The Sunni equivalent in the Vatican in Cairo work together with the Muslim Brotherhood from Cairo, who are Sunni, and the Christian side coming from the Vatican. All role players, each and every one of them. But the people blame the Muslims. It's nothing to do with it. They're just the pawns in the game, like we are. So, some of the things that have been going on in the public is not some of the technically good guys winning. It's more the case of the bad guys exposing the bad guys because of the breaks in all the factions. Mr. McCain, old squiddle chops, was caught in a deliberate false flag transaction to do with the Russian plane that went down this week. They've caught the transcripts of McCain involving paid mercenaries again to create a false flag. Putin's aide, Mikhail Lesin, died yesterday in a US hotel. Mysterious circumstances is another escalation of the infighting going on between the groups. The royal families are being exposed. New pictures and stories of who Hitler really was, who he's related to, and when he died will be forthcoming. The Bush and Clinton scandals, as Drake mentioned earlier. The Bushes on the cargo plane in Fort Lauderdale or Miami, collecting their drugs. It's not a coincidence that's been put out. That's the Zionists taking the Nazis out. Clinton being exposed. Clinton is in league with the Bush cabal because they sold their soul over to the Bush cabal, who bailed them out because they were $7 million in debt. We'll pay your debt off. You join our side. The exposure of the CIA involved in the drug war all come out. Again, it's part of the factions fighting the factions. The role of the CIA, or sorry, not umbrella of the CIA, because there's some people in there that to our benefit. Their role in creating Al-Qaeda is ISIS, ISIL, plus the Taliban. Mentioned earlier about the USA firing on mainland China 4 times in 2 months. The USA and China have had an ongoing war in Yemen for the last 3 years. Not reported largely in the media. The exposure of Vatican pedophilia and scandal and corruption is again the Zionists outing the Jesuits. So the outing of McCain, Holder, Yellen, who's Obama's handler, Reid, Feinstein, Obama and his birth certificates issue, plus Mr. Bush Sr. or his clone, outing Cheney and Rumsfeld this week, is another section of the factions infighting. They're all throwing each other under the bus. They're all wanting control, and none of them have humanity at heart. Then we've got Cash coming out, stating, on the one hand, you can have our tech as long as you sign a world peace deal. We never saw that world peace deal, because it doesn't exist. They're not interested in peace. They want their Third World War. They want their Armageddon to fulfill their silly biblical prophecies. What 2 countries does he sign up with, Mr. Cash? Italy, aka Rome, and the Chinese, aka Li family, to introduce the tech there. Now, if China has got all this fancy tech, and is going to roll it out for the world and humanity, and they're all going to be peace loving, and we're all going to get on really well, and everything's going to be transparent, then why has China done an energy deal with fossil fuel or nuclear fuel with virtually every country it's come into contract in the last 2 years? Why would you want to build nuclear or coal or other energy plants, gas, when you've got all this fancy tech that doesn't require any of it? This is the issue we have with China. And the simple solution is because they are playing the New World Order game and will not allow their expansion and their own New World Order to be hampered. There was an article in 2002 statement where China laid out plans for their own New World Order. I'll come to that shortly. Last month, China signed a $60 billion deal with the UK for a nuclear plant. But they're supposed to have all this new technology that they're going to deliver to the rest of the world. That plant will not be ready until 2025. So what are they saying? It's going to take longer than 10 years to send the tech out? Or are they going to wipe the tech out and carry on with the fossil fuel and banking rubbish? Banking. Rothschilds are alleged to own 99% of the banks. This is incorrect. Their names are on 99% of the banks, but they are only brought in times of transition when things are collapsing, etc., on contract only. Physicists and mathematicians do the work of accountants in banking now. Accountancy is no more in banking. When the banks started, the TARP money came out, which means there is no more business deals between the banks, no more financial risks for the banks now, as all the interactions between the bank and government, or the bank and the central bank. So if the banks need any further funds, they do not have to go to each other now. There's no more financing, in inverted commas. Once the fact financing disappeared between the banking, it became a mafia, essentially. Another control system. If you're not already in that system, you cannot get in there. And the central bank prints PP money on behalf of the people, so therefore the banks are keeping the profit using the people's money. Once firmed up 2 years ago, that became official. No longer, so it's not legal, and it's certainly not moral. So the change in the financial system is an orchestration of what's about to happen. The financial system is no longer based on supply-demand model. It's become mainly clear to clear up the funds between the East and the West. And it's made to overcome any taxation issues between the different countries. So they use transactions where they're using instruments to hide the trisection to stop it from accumulating tax or duties as it goes between the different countries. So now, basically, you've got a level of flow of money which has nothing to do with any countries. That's all your money, by the way. In order to be part of the hierarchy in the family system, you have to be linking all your wealth in that system in order to become part of it. That is called a trust system, where the wealthy put their money into a trust, not just us, them as well, and then no longer are you the legal owner of the money and the funds, and the trust dispenses funds onto you. Now, to add a little caveat to that, the UK and the US brought in rules on January the 1st where your funds going into a bank no longer belongs to you. I'll repeat that again. Your funds going into a bank no longer belongs to you. They may or may not give you it back. And the same applies to these families. Basically, they take all their wealth, they centralise it in the funds, and they give them some of it back. When the people in those families, leading those families, decided they don't want to be part of it no more, they have to go away and are left with nothing. It's because the allocation of the wealth is put in a legal capacity that it is not theirs. So, for example, when the Rockefellers came in at the end of the 19th century and were joined by the J.P. Morgan, your primary requirement for Rockefeller was that all his wealth goes into a trust when he dies, and his trust is run by them, and his family then receives funding by the trust. So as soon as Rockefeller dies, his children no longer owned anything. So basically, they are subservient to the trust owners. Who are the trust owners? They're the same people who have their money, funding legally given to them from the trust. That's an invisible trust, so nobody actually owns anybody or anything. They dupe the rich people to join the trust after the network, saying it will negate taxes, but they lose all their assets to the trust. But they can still draw funds from the trust, but only if they follow the rules. And a caveat to that is this is the way the parents take out the bloodline families and cut them off at some point. Look, so over the last few years, we've been kind of led to believe that this BRICS Bank of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and South Africa, and a load of other countries was for our benefit. Now, you've all heard of Agenda 21. Some of you will have heard of 2030 Sustainable Development. Remember that, those words. Because here's a quote from the BRICS Bank. Both the purpose of and the need for the NDB are intrinsically linked to the imperative of efficiently channeling global savings estimated to be $17 trillion in 2012 into infrastructure and sustainable development. Where have we heard that term before? When the BRICS Bank was launched, where did they go to first? The IMF, the World Bank, the ECB, and the Bank of International Settlements. Putin himself stated earlier that it was not in competition with the above, but to work alongside it. Bear in mind, this was after Russia's SWIFT transactions were blocked. Overwhelming evidence of the Rothschilds' involvement in creating the BRICS, but more importantly, it was the Rockefellers who created the BRICS in a document going back as far as 1961 called the Project for America. As a result, the Illuminati would have trouble roping many nations into a Western-led New World Order, especially the nationalistic Chinese, so they created diversions. They set up a China-centered alliance as an opposing force to the Western alliance. This is part of the strategy that was hinted at in the mainstream press in this 2002 article titled "China Wants Its Own New World Order to Oppose the US Version." It is common practice for the cabal to use opposing forces to achieve their ends, and they always make sure they have influence or control over both sides. So the plan was to drive the world public into the hands of the Chinese alliance. How have they approached this? They have widely publicised a heinous new world order planned by the Western powers. The SCO was set up Shanghai Cooperation Organization, I think that is, in June of 2002 at a summit in the southern Chinese city of Shanghai attended by Chinese President Jiang Zemin, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the leaders of several Central Asian nations. Its military cooperation structure was deliberately modelled in part on the old Soviet-led Warsaw Pact and includes nations with more than a quarter of the human race, with more than 2 million soldiers under arms. On the same day, President George W. Bush, speaking in the Polish capital Warsaw, pledged to extend the NATO alliance to include all the nations of Central and Eastern Europe. Coincidence? No, it's not. The Russian and Chinese leaders in Shanghai left in no doubt that the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, also referred to as the Shanghai Pact, was a military cooperation organized, devoted to preserve what they called the multipolarity in the world. Multipolarity is a Russian and Chinese diplomatic word for opposing US global domination, which by contrast Moscow and Beijing both see as unipolar. So if BRICS were interested in taking on the Western institutions, why would the first currencies that went in the basket include dollar, pounds or euros? In March of 2015, Putin announced that his country would be nationalising their Rothschilds-controlled central bank. But the question is he really kicking out the Zionists? Bear in mind, that was 1 month after Putin disappeared for 10 days. So that may give an indication that Mr. Putin has changed sides. The Bank of International Settlements is linked in with BRICS. The evidence has been mounting throughout the war, this is the Second World War, that the Bank of International Settlements had helped the Germans loot assets from occupied countries, including gold rings and other items from labour and prison camp victims. The most notorious incident was the Bank of England transfer of the Bank of International Settlements gold looted by the Nazis after the invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1939. The fact that top-level German industrialists and advisors sat on the Bank of International Settlements board is ample evidence to understand how the Bank of International Settlements was used by Hitler throughout the war, with the help of American, British and French banks. There we go again, same three. Between 1933 and 1945, the Bank of International Settlement Board of Directors included a Walter Funk, a prominent Nazi official, Emil Puhl, as well as Hermann Schmitz, and the director of IG Farben, I think more commonly known as GE now, I think, and a Baron von Schroeder, the owner of J.H. Stein Bank, which has now got a different name. The Bretton Woods Conference recommended the liquidation of the Bank of International Settlements at the earliest possible moment. In April 1945, the new US President Harry S. Truman and the British government suspended that dissolution, and the decision to liquidate the Bank of International Settlements was reversed in 1948. Now, members of this BRICS, or of the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, to this day include the People's Bank of China, the Central Bank of Russia, the Hong Kong Monetary Fund, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And its director, I might add, is Janet Yellen. Zhu Xiaoxuan, on March 24, 2009, gave a speech, Reform the International Monetary System, which he argued that the ongoing financial crisis was made more severe by inherent weaknesses of the current international monetary system, and called for a gradual move towards using IMF special drawing rights, SDRs, as a centrally managed global reserve currency. He argued that this would address the inadequacies of using a national currency as a global reserve currency. Basically, the special drawing rights is every country hands over all their assets to that central bank, and the countries get draws from it. That is applied in the East currently at this moment. And that's fine if the controller is honest and sincere, but what happens if you're not? You end up with nothing. On the cover of the January 9th, 1988 issue of The Economist magazine, there was a phoenix rising from the ashes, burning national currencies including the dollar, 1988. The phoenix would probably start out as a cocktail of national currencies such as the special drawing right as today. In time, though, its value against national currencies would cease to matter, because people would choose it for its convenience and the stability of its purchasing power. The Phoenix Zone would impose tight constraints on national governments. There would be no such thing, for instance, as a national monetary policy, one world government, one world finance, one world religion. That's its own, yeah. The world Phoenix supply would be fixed by a new central bank, descended perhaps from the IMF. Governments are far from ready to subordinate their domestic objectives to the goal of international stability. Several more big exchange rate upsets, a few more stock market crashes, and probably a slump or two will be needed before politicians are willing to face squarely up to that choice. Well, we've all seen what's happened since 1988, of several exchange rate upsets, several stock market crashes, and several slump or twos, and several politicians willing to set us up into this one world system. Iraq has loads of wealth, i.e. oil, but it has no creditworthiness. The reason why is there's a block on it. The USA brought in JP Morgan to create that block, and a system whereby all the funds of the Iraqi people going in and out of Iraq runs through JP Morgan and is creamed off by their system. This facilitated the sale of the dinars, all looted by the cabal, particularly JP Morgan. They looted them and then propagated the get-rich-quick scheme via the internet gurus and its stooges to then capitalise their loot and to take more money off the people to prolong their gain. Now, the issue with Iraq, I said earlier about the 33rd degree in Baghdad, is Iraq is what's known currently as the Babylon. And the Babylon has to be resurrected or defeated. And these are repeated in history. If you look in the Quran, the Islamic side, it does say that when you grow, you defeat those who broke you before. Telling you, history repeats itself. So there's a goal that says that the goal is that they must kick the butt of Iraq, or actually it's not Iraq, but Babylon. But who carries the torch of Babylon at this time? Like I said, it's Iraq and it's Baghdad. So they have to totally rout Iraq to tick that box. This comes into the ancient magic and all that stuff again Drake's told you about. What you don't see is them cleaning up afterwards. They just leave it in total disarray. So the goal is not to fix it. The goal is to erase it. Like I said at the start, the Babylon has to be resurrected or defeated. And this is part of their Armageddon game, which comes into the Zionist movement and their religious system. They will be the only ones saved. But the message of the people who of Israel who apply by that book, it doesn't include you. I'm sorry. So, it's a lot of information to take in, and some of it people will know of it, and all of it's new, and then others a bit of both. The key aspects to it all is that the BRICS Bank is not there to help us or humanity. It's there to control again. China wants its own new world order. Benjamin Fulford hinted at this a couple of months ago. Plans are afoot to prevent that also. What is appearing to be winning is more a case, sadly, of the cabal infighting, be it the Jesuits, the Asian families, the Nazis, the Scottish Rite Freemason groups, or the Zionists. Russia is hanging by a thread in many aspects, as is Mr. Putin. Like I said earlier, Putin's background is KGB. He's also background in oligarchy. They routed out Russia, all the oil companies, and he gave most of the wealth to his pal, Roman Abramovich, who people in the UK will be familiar with. So his background was not good. But certain things took place in February where that may well have changed, and that's the hope for us all. Watch for what's going on in the Middle East. Put together the pieces of the puzzle given tonight, and then you get an understanding who's doing who and who's playing their part of the game, and why are they attacking this one. Why is Bush being exposed? Why is Clinton being exposed? Who benefits? Then you then all get an understanding. You don't need me or Drake to tell you. You then get an understanding of the whole game. And it is a game, and we're just the pawns in it. But be safe in the knowledge that people and humanity, when the time is right, will get help. But we also have to help ourselves. Like I said earlier, you can't, the quote, you can't keep keeping this information in the dark because it's uncomfortable. Or you can't keep hiding because it's people may say something about you. It doesn't matter what they say. It's like the words of Aristotle. There's only one way to avoid criticism: do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. I would sooner take criticism and do something, say something, and be something, whatever role that may be. Now, the other thing I want to ask you is the chemtrails. They're largely being closed down. I know some will say, not in my area, but the reality is a lot of them are being closed down because of the infighting. They can't decide what they should do at the moment. Now, there's big issues, galactic issues ongoing, and we may have to cover over in the second show in 2016. And this is why this has escalated to the levels it has now. Jesus said, ask and it will be given to you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened for you. The chemtrails was a block of the wave and the solar rays to help you. That has now been confirmed. It's a mirror. When the chemtrails aren't there, reach out to Source and ask for what you want and what we all want for all humanity is peace and freedom, we will receive. Doesn't always need a bullet or a tank or a plane. Sometimes it just takes people asking for what they want.